Greetings to everybody. What does Haitian and Bahamian solidarity mean to me? Haitian Bahamian solidarity means challenging myself to examine my relationship with all things related to Haiti. It means looking beyond the barriers of national identities that divide us and looking at ourselves as African people with a common heritage and a common culture. What does it mean to be the beneficiary of the Haitian Revolution? What does it mean to be the descendant of a Haitian priestess? What does it mean to come from a culture that gave birth to the Haitian experience, that sees as their worldview sacred energies as divine hands of God? What does it mean to come from a culture that recognizes the ancestors as living beings amongst us? These questions are essential and relevant, not only for my own self-cultivation, but also in order to be a co-creator in this harmonious relationship that we seek to establish between the Haitian community and the Bahamian community. Without this sort of engagement of these questions and without this sort of self-examination, the solidarity that we seek to achieve, will continue to be elusive and illusionary. As a writer, a journalist, a media practitioner, I see myself as playing a role in engaging in this solidarity process at many levels, of which I'll just identify a few. As a writer, as a journalist in the communication field, we need to challenge ourselves when we look at the use of language. For example, we need to look at how the use of language perpetuates stereotypes, perpetuates the single story, how the use of language creates a point of view from which people are judged and from which people frame their own view and directs their own decision making. So we often, for example, hear people refer to Haiti as the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And in articles, in journalistic articles, that's usually the most common qualifier we see whenever we refer to Haiti. Now, persons would argue that that's a fact, which may in fact be true. But then, of course, you have to look at the whole politics of poverty and the use of language like the poorest country, which operates at several levels of meaning. And we as journalists have a choice of which language to use and how to frame. We filter into information, and we have a choice of how to use language. So why not a situation where we refer to Haiti as a qualifying as an identifier, as the first free black republic, as the second free republic in the Western Hemisphere. These two are also quote-unquote facts, and yet they create a different frame of reference for which we will engage in a discussion about Haiti and the people of Haiti. So also, in the media, you find that people use language very carelessly and callously. Words like corrupt, incompetent, they're used particularly, well, actually, I won't even just say particularly in Western media or in American media, here as well. We use these words very carelessly in ways that not only denigrate people, but create false senses of reality. Why is it that low-wage workers, a particular word that has a lot of that is not a neutral word, is used to basically classify a group of workers. And that language has power. Language has power. So we need to constantly engage ourselves in how we engage in a self-examination of how we use language. And I think that is an important part of how we engage in this process of Haitian-Bahamian solidarity. Another aspect is challenging ourselves with an appreciation of context. Sometimes we in the communication field talk about things without an appreciation for context, and it creates false sense of perceptions in the public for which we disseminate information to. And in order to do that, we have to educate ourselves so that we ourselves understand the context. We have to free ourselves from this assumption that we know what we're talking about when we really don't know what we're talking about. And to infuse our work with this context that will give people a broader understanding of issues and a more rounded view of issues, so that they can have a more objective and holistic and healthy understanding of issues and of people.